The vast reaches of the Galactic Empire stretched across the stars, a colossal empire ruled by the Lorgoth Dominion. For centuries, the Lorgoth had held power over countless worlds, their advanced technology and ruthless military ensuring their dominance. The galaxy knew the Dominion as a force that could not be challenged, a civilization that stood above all others. But today, things were different. Today, a question echoed across their communications networks. Why was a human warship in this sector? Commander Zaylor, a seasoned officer of the Lorgoth Dominion, stared at the glowing screen in disbelief. The why? Sensor readings from the outer sector were clear. An unknown ship had just entered their controlled space. It was small, too small to be a threat, surely, but there was no denying what the readings showed. The ship's markings were unfamiliar, and its technology was unlike anything the Lorgoth had encountered before. A human warship. The words echoed in Zaylor's mind, though he couldn't believe them. Humanity? A species so young, so primitive. Compared to the Lorgoth, how could this be? Are you certain of this? Zaylor growled, turning to his chief officer, Commander Vranak, a tall and imposing figure of the Lorgoth race. Absolutely, Commander, Vranak replied, his voice steady but with a hint of confusion. We've never seen anything like it. It appears to be human, though. The markings match the early records from their first colony missions. Zaylor took a deep breath, trying to make sense of the situation. The Lorgoth had faced countless enemies in their long history, but humanity had never been one of them. The humans had only recently begun to venture into space, too recent to even matter to the Lorgoth. They were a species barely out of their Stone Age in comparison to the advanced technology of the Dominion. To think that a human ship had entered their domain without warning was absurd. And yet, there it was, on their sensors, approaching their borders. What is their intent? Zaylor asked. We don't know, Vranak answered. The ship is not responding to our hails, it's simply there. Zaylor frowned. His thoughts raced as he considered the possibilities. Was this some kind of trick? A scout ship, perhaps? The Lorgoth's enemies often sent small ships to test their defenses, but never this close to their main fleet. Never this boldly. Send a message to High Command, Zaylor ordered, and prepare the fleet. We will handle this ourselves. As the Lorgoth commanders scrambled to respond to the mysterious ship's presence, the Resolute, the human warship, drew closer. It was an old vessel, but it had been modified beyond recognition. Its hull was battered, covered in scorch marks from previous skirmishes, yet there was an undeniable strength in its design. Unlike the sleek, almost living ships of the Lorgoth, the Resolute looked like a heavy, unyielding fortress. It was clear that this ship was built for battle. Inside the Resolute, Captain John Hawkins surveyed the star charts on the screen in front of him. His brow furrowed as the coordinates matched exactly what he had been told. The Lorgoth's territory, the heart of their empire. The ship had made it this far. Hawkins leaned back in his chair, his mind calculating their next move. He had heard the stories. The Lorgoth were unstoppable, merciless conquerors who crushed everything in their path. But what people failed to understand about humans was that they never backed down. They never gave up. They found a way to survive. Hawkins had fought through battles before, battles that seemed impossible to win, but he had learned to trust his crew and the machines around him. This is it, folks, Hawkins said to the bridge crew, his voice calm but filled with authority. We've entered their space. We make a statement here. We're not just going to roll over. We're going to show them what humans are capable of. A nervous murmur spread across the bridge, but it quickly quieted as the crew members focused on their tasks. Hawkins could sense their determination. He knew they were ready. Captain, Lieutenant Harper called out, we've detected multiple ships approaching. Lorgoth, I believe. They're on an intercept course. Of course they are, Hawkins said with a slight smile. Let's give them a warm welcome. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, bring up the drones. The crew immediately went to work, their hands flying over the controls as the Resolute prepared to meet the oncoming threat. Back on the Lorgoth command ship, Zaylor received the first reports of the Resolute's actions. The human ship was moving, at an unexpectedly high speed, almost as if it had been waiting for this moment. The Lorgoth warships, enormous and deadly, were now in range. "Deploy the fleet," Zaylor ordered, his voice cold and unshaken. "Let's see what these humans are made of." Within moments, the Lorgoth fleet launched from their stations, massive warships with imposing weapons, designed to destroy anything in their path. Zaylor's eyes narrowed as he watched the display of ships lining up to form an attack formation, but, as they moved into position, something strange happened. The human ship, despite its size and seemingly limited capabilities, moved with incredible agility. It darted between the Lorgoth ships with a precision that should have been impossible. For something so small and outdated, the Resolute was like a shadow, dodging, weaving, and responding to every attack with shocking efficiency. "Commander," Vrenak called out in disbelief, "the human ship. It's outmaneuvering us." Zaylor's face twisted with anger. This was no ordinary human ship. It was more advanced than they had anticipated, and its captain seemed to be no ordinary officer. The Lorgoth's weapons fired, but the Resolute danced through the incoming fire, its shields holding strong, even absorbing some of the blasts and redirecting them back at the attackers. The Lorgoth fleet began to break formation, confusion spreading among the ranks. This wasn't the fight they had expected. This was a human warship, and it was not going down easily. On the Resolute, Hawkins watched the unfolding chaos on his own monitors. The Lorgoth were panicking, breaking ranks, unable to land a hit on his ship. This was exactly what he needed. The human ship was small, but it had been built to endure, to survive. The crew's training, their focus, and the ship's advanced systems were making all the difference. He gave the order. "Launch the drones. Show them that we mean business." The drones shot out in all directions, each equipped with high-tech weapons designed to disrupt the enemy's shields and cause maximum damage. They swarmed the Lorgoth fleet, exploding with pinpoint accuracy, throwing the Lorgoth into further disarray. And in the midst of it all, Hawkins stood tall, the perfect image of human defiance. The Lorgoth had underestimated humanity, and now they were about to pay the price. The stars above the Lorgoth Empire flickered like distant diamonds as the Resolute glided through the void. Captain John Hawkins sat in the command chair, eyes scanning the battle reports that flooded his screen. His crew had been working non-stop, keeping the ship moving with precision, evading the larger, more powerful Lorgoth warships. But Hawkins knew that the true test was yet to come. "Captain," said Lieutenant Harper, her voice cutting through the tense silence on the bridge, "the Lorgoth fleet is regrouping. They're coming in fast. 2 of their Titan-class battlecruisers are leading the charge." Hawkins nodded slowly, his expression hardening. The Lorgoth had deployed their heaviest ships. Titan-class battlecruisers were massive and heavily armed. They could decimate entire fleets with a single shot, and their weapons could tear apart anything in their path. But Hawkins wasn't intimidated. The Resolute had faced worse. "Ready the drones for interception," Hawkins ordered, his voice calm but firm. "And brace for impact. We're about to see what they're really made of." As the crew went to work, Hawkins leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed in concentration. The Lorgoth had underestimated humanity from the beginning. They had believed that the human warship, a relic from a primitive species, was an easy target. But humanity had learned to fight. They had learned to survive, and now the galaxy would see the strength of their will. On the bridge of the nearest Lorgoth Titan-class battlecruiser, Commander Zaylor gripped his command chair tightly. His sharp eyes followed the tactical display. As his fleet closed in on the human ship, the human vessel had proven to be a nuisance so far, but now, with their full fleet in place, the Lorgoth were ready to end this. "Prepare all weapons," Zaylor ordered coldly. "Target that human ship. We end this now." His officers nodded, their fingers flying over their controls. The massive cannons of the Titan-class battlecruisers powered up, humming with destructive energy. Zaylor's confidence grew with each passing second. The humans had no idea what they were about to face. Back on the Resolute, Hawkins was watching the incoming ships with a sense of calm. He had faced overwhelming odds before, but he had never been one to back down. As the Lorgoth ships approached, Hawkins could feel the ship's pulse, the thrum of the engines beneath his feet. The crew was ready. "Launch the drones," Hawkins ordered, "and don't give them a moment to breathe." A series of hatches opened on the Resolute, and hundreds of drones shot into the void, racing toward the approaching Lorgoth ships. The drones were small but fast, equipped with cutting-edge weaponry designed to disrupt the Lorgoth's advanced shields. They swarmed toward the battlecruisers, darting and weaving through the laser fire from the Lorgoth's cannons. Zaylor's eyes widened as the drones began to multiply, attacking from all angles. The Titan-class battlecruisers' shields flared as the drones collided with them, creating sparks of energy that filled the space. "Redirect all fire to the drones," Zaylor commanded, his voice tight with frustration. "Do not let them reach us." But the drones were relentless. They dodged and weaved with an agility that confused the Lorgoth. One by one, the smaller ships shot toward the battlecruisers, making it nearly impossible for the Lorgoth to keep up. The drones' precision strikes targeted weak points in the shields, creating cracks that grew wider with every hit. On the Resolute, Hawkins smiled grimly. "Phase 2, prepare the main weapons." The crew nodded in unison. The main weapon on the Resolute was a devastating laser cannon, one capable of cutting through even the strongest of shields. Hawkins knew it was their best chance to strike a decisive blow. He wasn't going to let the Lorgoth get away with this. As the Titan-class battlecruiser struggled to fend off the drones, the Resolute lined up its shot. Hawkins felt the tension build as the weapon charged. The bridge was silent except for the hum of the cannon powering up. Then, with a deafening roar, the cannon fired. A brilliant beam of energy shot from the Resolute, slamming into the first Titan-class battlecruiser. The ship's shields flared brightly, but the beam didn't stop. The energy crackled through the shield and blasted into the hull of the Lorgoth ship. The ship rocked violently as the cannon's blast tore through, its outer armor sending debris spiraling into space. Zaylor's eyes flashed with disbelief as he watched the damage unfold. His Titan-class battlecruiser was still intact, but the Resolute had done far more damage than he'd ever expected. The blast had torn through their shields like paper. "Reinforce the shields! Now!" Zaylor barked, but before his officers could react, another shot rang out from the Resolute. This time it was aimed directly at the second battlecruiser. The beam struck true, and within moments, the ship's shields began to buckle under the intense pressure. The Lorgoth ship shook violently and massive explosions erupted from the hull, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. "Retreat! All ships, retreat!" Zaylor's voice echoed in the command center, panic rising in his chest. The Lorgoth had never faced an enemy with this kind of firepower, and the human ship had just proven its strength. But it was too late. The Resolute wasn't done. Hawkins gave a sharp command, and the ship's cannons fired once more, this time targeting the remaining Lorgoth ships. The drones continued to harass the Lorgoth fleet, their small size and speed making them nearly impossible to hit. The Lorgoth fleet, once so powerful and organized, was now in disarray. Zaylor watched in horror as his fleet, once the pride of the Lorgoth Empire, was torn apart by the relentless assault from the humans. The Resolute had shown no fear, no hesitation. It was as if the ship was a living force of nature, unstoppable and determined. "Commander, we've lost contact with the remaining ships," one of Zaylor's officers reported. "The human ship is overpowering us." Zaylor clenched his fists in frustration. How could this be happening? The Lorgoth had conquered entire worlds, toppled empires, and crushed civilizations. And yet, a single human warship had just torn through their fleet with ease. The Lorgoth were not used to losing, and the reality of their failure hit them hard. Back on the Resolute, Hawkins was already preparing for the next wave. He knew the Lorgoth would regroup, but that didn't matter. He had made his point. The galaxy was watching, and humanity had just made its mark. "Lieutenant Harper," Hawkins said, his voice steady, "send a message to their command. Let them know we're not leaving. This is our sector now." Harper nodded, her fingers flying over the controls. Within moments, a message was sent across the galaxy, clear and simple. Humanity was here, and they were not afraid. This section builds up the clash between the two factions and showcases humanity's tactical strength and resilience. It sets up the stage for further battles and characterizes the Resolute as an indomitable force against overwhelming odds. In the aftermath of the devastating attack on the Lorgoth fleet, Commander Zaylor sat in the quiet of his command center, his fists clenched at his sides. His fleet had been decimated. His Titan-class battlecruisers, some of the most powerful ships in the galaxy, were no match for the human warship Resolute. The battle was not over, but the outcome was clear. The Lorgoth Empire had just met an enemy unlike any it had faced before. The Lorgoth commanders were in a state of panic. The once unquestionable superiority of the Lorgoth military had been shattered by a single human warship, and the entire galaxy had seen it. Zaylor's mind raced as he tried to formulate a plan. He had underestimated the humans, but there was no room for mistakes now. The Empire's pride was on the line, and he had to respond. "We cannot allow this human ship to survive," Zaylor said, his voice low but filled with authority. "Prepare the reinforcements. The Lorgoth Empire will not fall to a single vessel." His officers quickly went to work, sending distress signals across the galaxy to their allies, calling in support from every corner of their vast empire. The Lorgoth Dominion was one of the most powerful forces in the universe, and their reach was wide. If the humans wanted to challenge them, they would learn quickly that they were outmatched. "Commander, we've received responses from our allies," said a tactical officer, his voice tense. "We can expect reinforcements within hours. A fleet of this size should be able to overwhelm the human ship." Zaylor nodded, though his unease didn't entirely fade. The Resolute had shown a level of resilience and firepower that no one had expected. Still, he had no choice but to trust in the strength of the Lorgoth Empire. Reinforcements were on their way, and the human threat would be neutralized. Back aboard the Resolute, Captain Hawkins was calm, even as his sensors detected the incoming Lorgoth reinforcements. He knew they wouldn't let the loss of their fleet go unanswered. He had expected this. What he didn't expect was the sheer scale of the Lorgoth's response. Dozens of ships, ranging from advanced battlecruisers to heavily armed destroyers, appeared on his radar, cutting across space like a dark wave. "The Lorgoth are coming in full force," Harper said, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "They've sent everything they have left. This is going to be a fight for survival." Hawkins looked at the display in front of him, his mind calculating the next move. The Resolute had already taken a heavy toll on the Lorgoth, but the incoming fleet was unlike anything they had faced before. He knew that the human warship would not survive a direct confrontation with this many ships, but the key to survival was never in brute strength. It was in strategy. Hawkins had no intention of letting the Lorgoth corner them. "Everyone listen up," Hawkins said, his voice carrying across the bridge. "We've done damage to their fleet, but they're not finished yet. We need to keep the pressure on, but we can't afford to get trapped. Move fast, stay unpredictable. We'll hit them where it hurts, then pull back and regroup." The crew nodded, focused. Hawkins turned his attention to the tactical display. The Lorgoth fleet was closing in, but they weren't moving with the same confidence they had before. The Resolute's attack had shaken them, and it was clear that their strategy had faltered. Now was the time to capitalize on their uncertainty. "Launch the drones," Hawkins commanded, "and make sure they know we're not backing down." The drones shot from the Resolute once again, darting out in all directions. The Lorgoth ships opened fire, their weapons flaring as they tried to target the small, fast-moving drones. But the drones were relentless, weaving between blasts, striking at the Lorgoth ships with precision. Hawkins watched as the drones overwhelmed the Lorgoth's defenses, their shields flaring with each hit. The smaller ships worked in perfect harmony, causing chaos among the much larger enemy fleet. The Lorgoth, despite their strength, were being forced into a defensive position. "We're keeping them distracted, but we can't hold them off forever," Harper said, her fingers dancing. "Across the controls," Hawkins nodded. "We don't need to hold them off forever, just long enough." As the drones continued their assault, Hawkins gave the order to fire the Resolute's main cannon once more. The massive energy beam shot out, cutting through the void and striking one of the larger Lorgoth battlecruisers. The ship's shields flared under the impact, but the beam pierced through, ripping apart the ship's outer armor. The Lorgoth warship shuddered as explosions erupted across its hull. A cheer went up from the crew, but Hawkins quickly raised his hand. "Stay focused," he warned. "This isn't over." The Lorgoth fleet was still advancing, though the damage was beginning to show. Several of their ships had already taken heavy hits, and their formation was beginning to break down. The reinforcements had not yet arrived in full, but it was clear that the Resolute was not the easy target the Lorgoth had expected. For the first time, the Lorgoth realized they were facing a force that could fight back and win. On the bridge of the Lorgoth flagship, Zaylor's face twisted with frustration as he watched the battle unfold. His fleet was no longer advancing as smoothly as it had before. The Resolute had thrown them off course. The drones, the energy weapon, and the human ship's agility were far more than the Lorgoth had anticipated. "Commander, reinforcements are arriving," one of his officers said, though there was no joy in the words. Zaylor clenched his fists. It was time to end this. The Lorgoth would not be humiliated any further. "Prepare for a full-scale assault," Zaylor ordered. "We will surround the human ship. Bring in the heavy firepower, no more mistakes." The order was sent out, and within minutes, the Lorgoth's reinforcements began to pour into the battlefield, their ships massive and overwhelming. But as the first wave of new enemies arrived, Hawkins remained calm. He could see the numbers growing, but he could also see the cracks in the Lorgoth's tactics. They were regrouping, but they were still shaken. "Hold position," Hawkins said, his voice steady as ever. "We've still got this." The battle wasn't over. The Lorgoth were throwing everything they had at the Resolute, but Hawkins knew they had already gained something invaluable. The Lorgoth had seen their strength, and now they would never forget the name of the human warship. The Resolute had struck a blow that would echo across the galaxy. The Resolute hovered in the void, its crew ready and alert. But the battle was far from over. Despite the human warship's impressive performance, the Lorgoth were relentless, their reinforcements beginning to arrive in force. Hundreds of ships now filled the space around the Resolute, each one massive and deadly. The tide of battle had shifted, and the stakes were higher than ever. Captain John Hawkins stood at the front of the bridge, eyes fixed on the tactical screen. The situation was critical. The Lorgoth were regrouping, their fleet stronger than before. The Resolute had inflicted significant damage, but the enemy was now flooding the battlefield with new ships. Hawkins had known this was coming, but he had hoped to strike another decisive blow before the reinforcements arrived. It was clear, now that humanity's ship was outnumbered. The question was, how long could they hold out? "Captain, we've detected multiple Lorgoth battlecruisers," Lieutenant Harper said, her voice tense. "They're arriving in waves. There must be at least 50 of them now. They're surrounding us." Hawkins looked at the screen, his mind working quickly. The Resolute had a formidable array of weapons, but against so many enemy ships, it was becoming harder to evade the onslaught. Their shields were holding, but they wouldn't last forever. The Resolute had already taken some damage, and the drones were becoming less effective against such overwhelming numbers. "Can we break through their formation?" Hawkins asked, his voice calm but serious. Harper glanced at the data, her brow furrowed. "It's possible, but it's going to be risky. The Lorgoth are surrounding us. Even if we break through, we'll be exposed on all sides. We'd need to make a run for it." "Not yet," Hawkins said, his tone steady. "We're not running. Not yet." A few feet away, Commander Vance, the Resolute's tactical officer, was busy working the console. He looked up and spoke with urgency. "Captain, we've been hit in multiple places. Our outer hull is compromised. We need to pull back or reinforce our shields immediately." "Not yet," Hawkins repeated. "We hold position for now. I need one more chance to hit them where it hurts. They can't keep coming at us like this." The crew of the Resolute worked tirelessly as the ship continued to withstand the Lorgoth onslaught. The Lorgoth were relentless in their pursuit, and their firepower was growing more intense with each passing minute. But Hawkins knew something that the Lorgoth didn't. The Resolute wasn't fighting alone. "We've got backup," Hawkins said, turning toward Harper. "Send out the signal. Let them know it's time. Harper looked up, understanding instantly. She immediately turned to the communications console, typing in commands with rapid precision. The signal was sent. Distress calls went out to the UE. Nearest human fleet's ships positioned to respond in the event of a situation like this. The reinforcements they needed were already on their way, but it would take them a while to arrive. Signals out, Harper confirmed. It may take some time for our fleet to reach us, Captain. We'll hold on until then, Hawkins said firmly. Back in the heart of the Lorgoth fleet, Xalar was furious. The Resolute had crippled the first wave of his forces, but now, the humans had sent out a distress signal, and reinforcements were on their way. Xalor knew that the arrival of more human ships could change everything. His fleet was formidable, but fighting against the tide of reinforcements that was about to hit them would make things far more difficult. Commander Xalor, one of his officers said, their voice tense. The human ship has sent a signal. We've intercepted their distress call. They've called for reinforcements. Xalor's eyes widened as the reality of the situation hit him. The Resolute wasn't just a single ship. It was part of a larger force, one that could rival even the might of the Lorgoth Empire. He had misjudged them. The humans were far more organized and prepared than he had ever imagined. Prepare for the worst, Xalor ordered, a dangerous edge to his voice. We'll finish this fight today. The reinforcements were coming, but the Lorgoth were not about to sit back and let the human forces strike first. Xalor ordered his fleet to form a tighter perimeter around the Resolute, cutting off any escape routes. The Lorgoth were still confident that their firepower would be enough to overwhelm the human ship before reinforcements could arrive. We'll smash their defenses, Xalor said, his voice cold and determined. And when their backup arrives, we'll crush them all in one go. Back on the Resolute, Hawkins was preparing for the fight ahead. He knew they had little time. The Lorgoth were closing in, and the human reinforcements wouldn't be there soon enough to turn the tide. The battle was about to become even more intense. We need to create a diversion, Hawkins said. Vance, take control of the main cannons. We're going to give them something to focus on. Vance nodded, his fingers flying over the console. Ready, Captain. What's the plan? Hawkins looked at the display on the screen. The Lorgoth were closing in, their ships now nearly in range for a full assault. He needed to buy some time. We'll fire at the outer perimeter of their fleet, disrupt their formation, make them think we're trying to break through. That should buy us enough time to shift our position. The crew quickly adjusted to the plan. The Resolute fired a series of concentrated shots at the outer Lorgoth ships, striking at weak points in their shields. The explosions lit up the space around them, and the Lorgoth ships faltered. Their formation disrupted. It worked. The Lorgoth fleet reacted, moving to reinforce the area where the Resolute had hit. For a brief moment, the human warship had a chance to move out of the thickest part of the Lorgoth formation. We've got a window, Hawkins said. Let's move. The Resolute shifted position, ducking into a narrow gap between two Lorgoth ships. The crew worked quickly, using every trick they had to avoid detection. They needed to buy just a few more minutes. Lieutenant Harper, how far are we from reinforcements? Hawkins asked, his voice steady as ever. Harper glanced at the communications readout. Our fleet is less than 30 minutes away, Captain, but they're still in hyperspace. We can hold that long, Hawkins replied, his confidence unwavering. We'll make sure they know we're not giving up. The minutes passed slowly as the Resolute moved through the chaos, avoiding the Lorgoth's concentrated fire. Hawkins knew that this was just the beginning. The Lorgoth would not stop until they had destroyed the human ship, but as long as the Resolute held strong, humanity's reinforcements would arrive. And then the battle would truly shift in their favor. In this section, the Lorgoth react to humanity's reinforcements, while the crew of the Resolute works tirelessly to hold their position and buy time. This part sets the stage for the arrival of human reinforcements and heightens the stakes of the battle as humanity's resolve is tested once again. The Resolute slipped through the Lorgoth fleet like a shadow, moving with deadly precision as it evaded every attack. Captain Hawkins stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes glued to the tactical display. They had done it. The Lorgoths' concentration had shifted just enough to give them an opening. Now they had the advantage, but Hawkins knew it wouldn't last long. The enemy was still strong, and the battle was far from over. "Lieutenant Harper," Hawkins said calmly, "keep the reinforcements updated. They need to know the situation is critical." Harper nodded and began transmitting a report, her fingers moving quickly across the console. The Resolute had held its own against the Lorgoth, but the human reinforcements were their last hope. The Resolute was strong, but it could not fight. The entire Lorgoth fleet alone, not for long. Every moment counted now. The crew of the Resolute was working in unison, every move planned and calculated. They had already taken a toll on the Lorgoth fleet, but Hawkins knew that the Lorgoth were not a species to give up easily. Their pride was at stake, and they would keep fighting until their last ship was destroyed, or they had wiped out the human threat completely. "Captain," Vance, the tactical officer, spoke up, "we've been monitoring Lorgoth communications. They're panicking. They're starting to realize this isn't just a small group of humans. They're facing an organized force." Hawkins didn't reply immediately. He knew the Lorgoth wouldn't stop until they were absolutely sure the Resolute was destroyed. But they had underestimated humanity. What the Lorgoth didn't know was that the human fleet was already on its way. Their reinforcements were coming, and soon the balance of power in the galaxy would shift forever. "I've been watching the battle unfold," Vance continued. "We've done significant damage, but their reinforcements are still a threat. They're on full alert and they'll be more aggressive. We'll have to outthink them, not just outfight them." "I know," Hawkins said, a slight smile crossing his face. "That's what we do best." Far away, beyond the immediate reach of the Resolute, another human fleet was emerging from hyperspace, its ships gliding into position. This fleet, a group of warships and supply ships, had been called into action after Hawkins sent his distress signal. They were still hours away, but they were moving at full speed, determined to get to the Resolute in time to turn the tide of the battle. On the bridge of the lead ship, Captain Emily Carter, the commander of one of humanity's best fleets, stood at the helm, her expression steely with determination. She had heard the call for reinforcements and knew it was now or never. She had trained her crew for moments like this. She had no intention of letting the Lorgoth defeat the humans, no matter what the cost. "We'll reach the battle zone in less than 30 minutes, Captain Carter said, her voice sharp. "Tell the fleet to prepare for combat. We're going in." A technician quickly responded. "Captain, our sensors are picking up the Resolute in the heart of the battle. They're still holding their position, but the Lorgoth are closing in fast. It won't be long before they're overwhelmed." Carter's eyes narrowed. The Resolute had already done more than anyone could have expected. Now it was time for the human fleet to deliver the finishing blow. She had no doubt that Hawkins and his crew had made a mark, but now it was her turn to make sure the Lorgoth never forgot what it meant to face humanity. "Rally the fleet," Carter said firmly. "We've got one chance to show the Lorgoth that humanity isn't something to be trifled with. Move out." Back on the Resolute, Hawkins continued to monitor the incoming threat. The Lorgoth fleet had formed a tight circle around the Resolute, their ships closing in. It was clear they had every intention of finishing the fight once and for all. But Hawkins didn't back down. The Resolute was his ship, and he wasn't about to let it be destroyed, not after everything they had already accomplished. "All hands, prepare for battle," Hawkins said, his voice carrying throughout the ship. "We've survived this long. Now let's make sure the Lorgoth remember the name Resolute." The crew of the Resolute moved with practiced efficiency. They had been through a lot already, but this was the moment that would define their future. The ship's weapons powered up, and the shields flared brightly as the Lorgoth ships closed in. Just as the Lorgoth launched another round of heavy fire toward the Resolute, something unexpected happened. The Resolute's communication systems pinged with a new signal. Hawkins' eyes widened in surprise. A massive human fleet had arrived, appearing out of hyperspace like a wave crashing onto the Lorgoth's defenses. The reinforcement ships came into view, led by Captain Carter's flagship. The Lorgoth had no time to react. The human ships opened fire with devastating accuracy. their weapons cutting through the outer ships of the Lorgoth fleet like knives through paper. The new arrivals were well prepared, their cannons blazing and shields holding strong. The battle was no longer one-sided. "Captain, reinforcements are here," Harper exclaimed, her voice full of disbelief and excitement. Hawkins looked at the screen, his mind racing. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Humanity had just shown the Lorgoth that they were not a species to be ignored. They were a force, and the galaxy would now know it. The Resolute's weapons fired again, this time with the full support of the human fleet. Together, the ships tore through the Lorgoth formations. The combined might of humanity's ships was unstoppable. The Lorgoth, for the first time in centuries, began to falter. "Keep pushing forward," Hawkins ordered. "We've got them, on the run. Let's finish this." The Lorgoth fleet tried to regroup, but it was too late. The human ships were everywhere, firing relentlessly, moving in perfect coordination. One by one, the Lorgoth warships began to fall. Massive explosions erupted as their shields gave out, their hulls breaking apart under the onslaught. The tide had turned. Humanity had come to show the galaxy just what it was capable of. But Hawkins knew this was just the beginning. The Lorgoth would regroup, and the fight would continue. The Resolute had proven that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, but the war for the galaxy was far from over. "This is just the start," Hawkins said, a smile forming on his face. "Humanity has arrived." In this part, humanity's reinforcements arrived just in time to shift the tide of the battle. It shows the resilience and strategy of the human forces as well as the Lorgoth's realization that they're facing a much stronger enemy than they ever anticipated. The battle for the galaxy is only beginning, and the stage is set for even greater challenges ahead. The battle was now raging across the stars. What had begun as a single unexpected human warship, the Resolute, appearing in the heart of Lorgoth space, had escalated into a full-scale conflict. The Lorgoth, once the unquestioned rulers of the galaxy, were now fighting for their survival against a species they had underestimated, and as the human reinforcements arrived and joined the fray, it was clear that the tide of the battle had shifted forever. Captain John Hawkins stood at the front of the bridge of the Resolute, staring at the chaotic battlefield unfolding outside. His heart raced with adrenaline, but his mind was focused. The Lorgoth fleet was regrouping, and they were determined to push humanity back. The human reinforcements had given them a temporary advantage, but Hawkins knew that the Lorgoth were not done yet. They would come at them with everything they had. This fight was far from over. "Captain, the Lorgoth are consolidating their forces," Lieutenant Harper said, her voice urgent. "They're going to make one final push to break our lines." Hawkins nodded grimly. He had expected this. The Lorgoth were not used to losing, and their pride would not allow them to surrender. This would be their last attempt to crush humanity, before it became an unstoppable force. Hawkins had no intention of letting them succeed. "We need to hold them off," Hawkins said firmly, his voice carrying across the bridge. "We're not backing down, not now." As the crew of the Resolute prepared for the next wave of the Lorgoth assault, Hawkins couldn't help but feel the weight of what they had achieved so far. Humanity had already proven that it could stand toe-to-toe with the Lorgoth. But the Lorgoth weren't finished yet, and humanity had to show them that they were not just a force to be reckoned with. They were a force that could not be defeated. "Captain," Vance, the tactical officer, spoke up from the control panel. "The Lorgoth fleet is massing. They're bringing in their final wave of reinforcements. It's going to be their most powerful strike yet." Hawkins turned to face Vance. "How long do we have?" "We're looking at maybe 20 minutes, before they're in full range," Vance replied, his fingers moving quickly over the console. "This is going to be a full-on assault." Harper turned to Hawkins with a worried expression. "Captain, the Resolute is still in good condition, but we've taken some damage. If we don't have help soon, we won't be able to hold them off much longer." Hawkins met her gaze with a steady look. "We've made it this far, Harper. We'll make it through this." As the Resolute continued to maneuver through the battlefield, the human reinforcements, led by Captain Emily Carter, pressed forward. their weapons firing in perfect unison. The Lorgoth fleet was closing in, fast, their ships advancing like a massive wall of destruction. There was no way to avoid the inevitable conflict. But Hawkins wasn't ready to give in. Not yet. The human fleet formed a defensive line alongside the Resolute, each ship taking a strategic position as they prepared for the worst. The Lorgoth were coming, and this time, it wasn't just a few ships. It was their entire fleet, and they were not holding back. "We're about to face everything they've got," Carter said over the comms, her voice steady despite the chaos. "But I'll be damned if we let them walk over us. Ready your crew, Captain Hawkins. This ends today." "Understood, Captain Carter," Hawkins replied, feeling the weight of the moment. "We'll fight side by side." The next few minutes felt like an eternity. The Resolute's shields were holding strong, but every impact from the Lorgoth weapons sent a shockwave through the ship. Hawkins could hear the hum of the shields as they absorbed the blows, the ship groaning under the pressure. But they weren't going to stop. Not now. "Fire on their lead ships," Hawkins ordered, his voice unwavering. "Take out their command vessels first." The Resolute's main cannon fired, sending a powerful beam streaking toward the lead Lorgoth warship. The blast hit its shields, flaring brightly as it struggled to hold against the attack. The human ships in perfect coordination followed suit, their weapons firing in unison to target the enemy's command vessels. One by one, the Lorgoth ships began to falter, their shields weakening under the relentless assault. On the Lorgoth flagship, Commander Zaylor was watching the destruction unfold with growing desperation. His once proud fleet was being torn apart before his eyes. Despite their overwhelming numbers, the humans had found a way to fight back. He had never expected this, never expected the human resistance to be so fierce, so determined. It was clear now that humanity was not going to be a footnote in the galaxy's history. They were going to be a power, a force that could not be ignored. "Commander Zaylor," one of his officers called out, panic in his voice. "The humans, they've broken through our defenses. Our ships are being destroyed." Zaylor's face twisted, with fury. He couldn't let it end like this, not after everything they had built. He stood up from his command chair, his fists clenched. "Bring everything we have left. We're not retreating. We will crush them, even if it takes every last ship in the fleet." The Lorgoth fleet, though battered and broken, continued to fight back with every ounce of their remaining strength. But the human fleet was relentless. The Resolute and its reinforcements were too much. The tide had turned, and the Lorgoth knew it. Back on the Resolute, Hawkins felt the pressure mounting, but his resolve was as strong as ever. The Lorgoth had given it their all, but they couldn't stop humanity. Not anymore. "Vance," Hawkins said, his eyes locked on the battlefield. "Send them a message." Vance looked up from his console, his expression grim. "You want to send them a message now, Captain?" "Exactly," Hawkins replied. "Let them know we're not going anywhere. Let them know humanity is here to stay." Vance nodded and sent the message. Across the stars, every Lorgoth ship that still had functioning communications received the same signal. Humanity will not be defeated. This galaxy is ours now. The final push came quickly. The remaining Lorgoth ships, now leaderless and broken, began to fall apart under the sustained assault. The human fleet, though still damaged, pressed forward with relentless fury, pushing the Lorgoth back. Within minutes, the remaining Lorgoth warships were either destroyed or in full retreat. As the last of the Lorgoth ships vanished into the distance, Hawkins stood in the center of the bridge, his chest rising and falling with the excitement of the victory. The battle was over, and humanity had won. The Lorgoth Empire, once thought unbeatable, had been driven from their space. Humanity had proven that they could stand against any foe no matter the odds. Hawkins looked out at the stars, his heart swelling with pride. The Resolute had delivered the message. The galaxy would never be the same again. "We did it," Harper said, her voice filled with awe. Hawkins smiled. "Yes, we did. But this is just the beginning. The galaxy belongs to humanity now, and we're only getting started. In this final part, humanity triumphs over the Lorgoth in a hard-fought battle, With their reinforcements and unwavering resolve, the humans defeat the Lorgoth and take their place as a major power in the galaxy. The story concludes with humanity's victory and the promise of more challenges ahead, setting the stage for